The ballroom fell silent the moment Caleb Hayes walked through the double doors. His ex-wife's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Her new husband's smile froze mid-conversation, because standing beside Caleb wasn't the broken man they'd left behind. It was someone who looked like he'd clawed his way out of hell and built a kingdom on the other side. And beside him, holding his daughter's hand, was a young woman no one in that room had ever seen before. This is a story about what happens when the people who counted you out realize they made a terrible miscalculation. If you want to see how this plays out, stick with me until the end. And drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. 6 months earlier, Caleb Hayes sat in his truck outside a shuttered storefront on the east side of Portland, staring at a stack of final notices on the passenger seat. The engine was off. The heat had stopped working 2 weeks ago. His breath fogged the windshield in slow, uneven clouds. He was 32 years old and his life had come apart in less than a year. The business, Hayes Construction Solutions, had been his father's before it was his. Caleb had taken it over when the old man retired, thinking he could modernize it, expand it, maybe even franchise it. He'd taken out loans, hired aggressively, signed contracts he didn't fully understand because the lawyers made them sound bulletproof. Then the housing market shifted. 2 major clients declared bankruptcy within the same month. A supplier sued him over a payment dispute that turned out to be based on forged invoices from a contractor Caleb had trusted. By the time he realized what was happening, the company was bleeding cash and his reputation was in the gutter. The final blow came when his wife Vanessa filed for divorce. Not because of the money, though that didn't help, but because she'd been seeing someone else for most of the last year. Someone who worked in finance. Someone who wore suits that cost more than Caleb's monthly truck payment. The custody arrangement was brutal. Caleb got his daughter, Emma, every other weekend and 1 weeknight. Vanessa got the house, the car, and the satisfaction of knowing she'd moved on while Caleb was still picking up the pieces. Emma was 8, sharp as a whip, with her mother's dark eyes and Caleb's stubbornness. She didn't talk much about the divorce, but Caleb could see it in the way she looked at him, like she was waiting for him to fall apart completely. He couldn't let that happen. Caleb shoved the notices into the glove compartment and started the truck. The engine coughed twice before it caught. He pulled out of the lot and headed toward the apartment he was renting on the south side, a 1-bedroom walk-up that smelled like old carpet and disappointment. It was a Tuesday. Emma would be at Vanessa's. Caleb had the night to himself, which meant microwaved leftovers and staring at spreadsheets until his eyes blurred. He was halfway home when he saw her. She was standing on the shoulder of the highway, just past the exit for Beaverton. Young, mid-20s maybe, thin jacket, no umbrella, soaking wet from the rain that had started 20 minutes earlier. She had her thumb out, but no one was stopping. Caleb's first instinct was to keep driving. He had enough problems. But something about the way she stood there, shoulders pulled back, chin up, like she was daring the world to ignore her, made him slow down. He pulled onto the shoulder 50 feet ahead of her and waited. She jogged up to the passenger window, hesitant. Caleb rolled it down. "You need a ride?" he asked. She studied him for a moment, rain dripping off her nose. "Where are you headed?" "South side. You?" "Anywhere that's not here." Caleb nodded toward the passenger seat. "Get in." She did. No hesitation after that. Just climbed in, pulled the door shut, and sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't mention it." They drove in silence for a few minutes. Caleb cranked the heat as high as it would go, which wasn't much. The girl, woman really, didn't complain, just sat there, dripping onto the floor mat. "I'm Caleb," he said eventually. "Mira." "Where were you trying to get to, Mira?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was flat. "I don't know, I just needed to leave." Caleb glanced at her. She was staring out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. There was a bruise on her wrist, faint but visible. She caught him looking and tugged her sleeve down. "You in some kind of trouble?" Caleb asked. "Not the kind you're thinking." "What kind then?" She turned to look at him. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "The kind where you make one bad call and it costs you everything." Caleb almost laughed. "Yeah, I know that kind." They didn't talk much after that. Caleb dropped her off at a diner near his apartment and offered to buy her a meal. She said no, but he left a 20 on the table anyway and walked out before she could argue. He didn't expect to see her again. But 2 days later, she was sitting on the steps outside his apartment building when he came home from a failed meeting with a potential investor. "How did you find me?" Caleb asked, stopping a few feet away. Mira stood, brushing off her jeans. "You left your business card on the table at the diner." "That was an accident." "I figured." She crossed her arms. "I wanted to thank you. Properly." "You don't owe me anything." "I know, but I do anyway." She paused. "Also, I need a job." Caleb blinked. "I don't have a job to give you. I barely have a business." "I know. I looked you up." "Of course you did. You're in debt. Your credit's shot. You've got 3 pending lawsuits and no capital to fight them. Your last contract fell through because the client thought you were unreliable." She tilted her head. "Am I wrong?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "No, you're not wrong." "Then let me help." "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I'm good at fixing things that are broken, and because I don't have anywhere else to be." Caleb studied her. There was something unsettling about the way she spoke, like she'd already thought 10 steps ahead and was just waiting for him to catch up. "What kind of work did you do before, he asked. "Investment analysis, market research, strategic planning." She shrugged. "I worked for a firm in Seattle until they decided I was more valuable as a scapegoat than an employee." "So you got fired?" "I got framed." Her voice didn't waver. "They pinned a failed acquisition on me to cover their own mistakes. I had 2 choices: take the fall quietly or fight it and lose everything anyway. I chose the first option, thought I could start over somewhere else. Turns out, reputation travels faster than you do." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "I can't pay you." "I don't need money right now. I need a roof and something to do." "I don't have a roof to offer. I've got a 1-bedroom apartment with a couch that's older than you are." "I've slept in worse places." Caleb didn't doubt it. Against every instinct that told him this was a bad idea, he nodded. "All right, you can stay for a week. After that, we'll see." Mira's expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You're going to regret this when you see the state of my filing system." She almost smiled. "I've seen worse." The first 3 days were strange. Mira moved through the apartment like a ghost. Quiet, efficient, never in the way. She slept on the couch, woke up before Caleb, and had coffee ready by the time he stumbled out of the bedroom. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just observed. On the 4th day, she started reorganizing his paperwork. Caleb came home from a supply run to find her sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by folders, invoices, and contracts. She'd laid everything out in neat rows, color-coded and labeled. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked, setting down a bag of groceries. "Fixing your chaos," Mira said, without looking up. "You've been paying the same insurance premium twice for 6 months. Your supplier contracts are overlapping in ways that are costing you at least 15% more than they should. And you've got a pending refund from the city that you never followed up on." Caleb crouched down beside her. "How did you figure all that out?" "It's not hard. You just have to know where to look." She handed him a spreadsheet. "I made this. It's everything you owe, everything you're owed, and everything you can renegotiate. If you tackle it in this order, you'll cut your debt by 1/3 in 90 days. Caleb stared at the spreadsheet. It was meticulous, detailed. The kind of work that would have taken him weeks to pull together, and even then, he wouldn't have done it this well. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Mira finally looked at him. "Because I told you I'm good at fixing things, and because you didn't leave me on the side of the road." Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "All right, let's do it." Over the next 2 weeks, Mira became indispensable. She called creditors and negotiated payment plans Caleb didn't think were possible. She reviewed old contracts and found loopholes that let him out of bad deals. She even reached out to a few of Caleb's former clients and convinced 2 of them to give him another shot. Caleb didn't understand how she did it. She was barely 25, but she talked like someone who'd spent a decade in boardrooms. She knew which levers to pull, which threats were real, and which people could be swayed with the right combination of charm and pressure. "Where did you learn this?" Caleb asked one night, watching her draft an email to a supplier. "Seattle," Mira said simply. "I worked for a firm that specialized in hostile takeovers. You learn pretty fast how to make people do things they don't want to do." Sounds ruthless. It was. She hit send and closed the laptop, but it also taught me how to survive when no one else is on your side. Caleb thought about that. Is that why you left? Mira's expression darkened. I didn't leave. I got pushed. She didn't elaborate, and Caleb didn't push. Sick. By the end of the month, things were starting to turn around. Caleb landed a small contract to renovate a cafe in the Pearl District. It wasn't much, but it was work. Real work. The kind that came with a paycheck and a timeline. Emma noticed the change too. She came over for the weekend and found Mira in the kitchen making pancakes. Who are you? Emma asked, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. I'm Mira, Mira said, flipping a pancake with more confidence than Caleb had ever managed. I'm helping your dad with some work stuff. Do you live here? For now. Emma looked at Caleb, who was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. Is she your girlfriend? No, Caleb said quickly. She's a friend. She's staying on the couch, Mira added. Your dad's letting me crash here while I get back on my feet. Emma considered this. Then she sat down at the table and said, Can I have chocolate chips in mine? Mira smiled. Absolutely. Caleb watched the two of them talk while Mira finished the pancakes. Emma was usually guarded around new people, but with Mira she seemed almost relaxed. Maybe it was because Mira didn't try too hard, didn't ask too many questions, just treated Emma like a person instead of a kid who needed to be handled carefully. After breakfast, Emma pulled Caleb aside. I like her, she said. Yeah? Yeah, she's not like Mom's friends. Caleb didn't know how to respond to that, so he just ruffled Emma's hair and said, Good. Kirk. The first real test came 3 weeks later. Caleb got a call from one of his former partners, a guy named Derek Lowe who'd been part of the company before everything fell apart. Derek had bailed early, taking a chunk of the client list with him. Caleb hadn't spoken to him since. Caleb, Derek said, his voice smooth and familiar. I heard you're back in the game. Word travels fast. It does when you're working with the right people. Derek paused. Look, I know things didn't end well between us, but I've got a project that's too big for me to handle alone. Thought you might be interested. Caleb's instincts screamed that this was a trap, but he needed the work. What's the project? Commercial build, downtown, 3-month timeline, solid budget. I need someone who knows how to move fast and keep costs down. Why me? Because you're desperate, Derek said bluntly. And because I know you'll work harder than anyone else I could hire. Caleb hated that Derek was right. What's the catch? No catch. Just business. Caleb hung up and told Mira about the offer. She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. What do you think? Caleb asked. I think Derek Lowe is the guy who screwed you over the first time, Mira said, and I think he's only calling because he needs something from you. I know, but if the project's real, it could pull us out of the hole. Mira nodded slowly. Then we make sure the contract protects you. I'll draft it. You don't sign anything until I've reviewed every line. Caleb agreed. And for the first time in months, he felt like he wasn't navigating this alone. The contract negotiations took a week. Derek pushed back on almost every clause Mira added, but she didn't budge. Caleb watched her work, calm, precise, relentless. She didn't raise her voice, didn't get emotional, just laid out the terms and waited for Derek to cave. Eventually, he did. The project started in early November. It was grueling, long hours, tight deadlines, constant problems. But Caleb had Mira managing the logistics, and for the first time in years, things ran smoothly. She coordinated with suppliers, kept the budget tight, and handled Derek whenever he tried to pull something shady. By mid-December, they were ahead of schedule. The client was happy. Derek was making money, and Caleb was finally starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could pull this off. Then Vanessa called. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice tight. About what? About Emma, and about the wedding. Caleb's stomach dropped. What wedding? Mine. I'm getting married in February, and I want Emma to be there. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Congratulations. Thank you. Vanessa paused. I'm inviting you too. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, and because Emma asked. Caleb closed his eyes. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. I need a head count. She hung up. Caleb sat there staring at the phone, feeling the weight of everything he'd lost settle back onto his shoulders. Mira found him like that an hour later. She didn't ask what was wrong, just sat down beside him and waited. "My ex-wife's getting married," Caleb said finally. "And she invited you?" "Yeah." "Are you going?" "I don't know. Probably not. What's the point?" Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The point is showing Emma that you're not afraid, that you didn't break, that you're still standing." Caleb looked at her. "You think I should go?" "I think you should do whatever feels right. But if you ask me, walking into that room and letting them see what you've built, that's the kind of thing that changes how people look at you." Caleb thought about that, and for the first time he started to consider it. The project wrapped 2 weeks before Vanessa's wedding. The client was thrilled. Derek paid on time, which was a minor miracle, and Caleb's bank account, for the first time in over a year, had a balance that didn't make him want to throw his phone into the river. Mira suggested they celebrate. Nothing fancy, just dinner at a quiet spot in Northwest Portland. Caleb agreed. They sat across from each other in a corner booth, the noise of the restaurant fading into the background. Mira looked different in the soft light, less guarded, more present. "You did good," she said, raising her glass. "We did good," Caleb corrected. Mira smiled. "Fair enough." They clinked glasses. Caleb took a sip and said, "I've been thinking." "About?" "About what happens next. The wedding's in 2 weeks. After that, I've got some breathing room. Maybe enough to start thinking long-term again." "That's good?" "Yeah." Caleb hesitated. "I was also thinking that if you wanted to stay, not just on the couch, we could figure something out. Make it official. You could be a partner, or at least someone on the payroll." Mira's expression shifted. For a moment, Caleb thought she was going to say no, but then she nodded. "I'd like that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. "All right then." They finished dinner and walked back to the apartment in comfortable silence. The city was alive around them. Lights, voices, the hum of traffic. But for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt like he was part of it instead of drowning in it. When they got home, Emma was waiting on the couch. Vanessa had dropped her off early. "Hey, kiddo," Caleb said. "Thought you weren't coming until tomorrow." "Mom had a thing," Emma said. She looked at Mira. "Can we watch a movie?" Mira glanced at Caleb, who nodded. "Sure," she said. The three of them settled onto the couch. Emma picked something animated and loud. Caleb didn't pay much attention to the screen. He just sat there, his daughter on one side and Mira on the other, and thought about how strange it was that 6 months ago he'd had nothing. Now he had this, whatever this was. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was enough. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like something worth holding on to. The week before the wedding, Caleb got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Caleb Hayes?" The voice was crisp, professional. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Jonathan Reese. I'm a partner at Reese Capital Group. I've been hearing some interesting things about your recent work." Caleb's heart skipped. "From who?" "Derek Lowe mentioned your name, but I did my own research. I like what I saw." "What do you want?" "I want to meet. I've got a project that might interest you. Big scope, national footprint, the kind of thing that could take your company to the next level." Caleb didn't trust it, but he didn't hang up either. "When?" "Next week, after the wedding, I assume." Caleb froze. "How do you know about the wedding?" Jonathan laughed. "Portland's a small town, Mr. Hayes. Word gets around. I'll be there, actually. Vanessa's fiancé is a colleague of mine." Caleb's stomach turned. "I see. I'll find you there. We can talk then." The line went dead. Caleb sat there, staring at the phone, feeling like the ground had just shifted under his feet. Mira appeared in the doorway. "Who was that?" "Someone who wants to offer me a deal. Good deal or bad deal?" "I don't know yet." Caleb looked at her. "But I think we're about to find out." The invitation sat on Caleb's kitchen counter for 3 days before he touched it again. Thick cardstock, embossed lettering, Vanessa's new last name printed in elegant script beneath her fiancé's. Graham Whitmore. The name alone sounded expensive. Mira walked past it every morning without comment, but Caleb could tell she noticed. She had a way of seeing everything without appearing to look. On Thursday, Emma brought it up. She was sitting at the table doing homework, chewing on the end of her pencil the way Vanessa hated. "Are you going to Mom's wedding?" she asked, not looking up from her math problems. Caleb glanced at Mira, who was washing dishes at the sink. She kept her back turned, but he knew she was listening. "I don't know yet," Caleb said. "She said you probably wouldn't come." That stung more than it should have. "What do you think I should do?" Emma shrugged. "I think you should come. It'd be weird if you weren't there." "Weird how?" "I don't know, just weird." She finally looked up at him. "Everyone's going to be asking where you are if you don't show up, and then Mom's going to have to make up some story about why you couldn't make it." Caleb sat down across from her. "You want me there?" "Yeah, I do." That settled it. Not the investors, not the opportunity to prove something to Vanessa or her smug fiancé, just Emma asking him to show up. "All right," Caleb said. "I'll go." Emma smiled, small but genuine. "Can Mira come too?" Caleb blinked. "Why would Mira come?" "Because she lives here. And because I like her." Emma went back to her homework like the matter was decided. Mira turned around from the sink, dish towel in hand. She looked at Caleb with raised eyebrows. "You don't have to," Caleb said quickly. "I know." Mira dried her hands. "But if Emma wants me there, I'll go." Emma grinned without looking up. "Good." Caleb had no idea what he'd just agreed to, but it was too late to back out now. The next morning, Caleb called Derek to confirm a final payment detail. Derek answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Yeah?" "It's Caleb. I need the final transfer pushed through by tomorrow. The crew's waiting on their checks." "It'll be there Monday." "That's not what we agreed on." Derek sighed. "Look, I've got my own cash flow issues right now. The client's holding back 20% until the final inspection. Soon as that clears, you get paid." "That wasn't in the contract." "It's standard practice, Caleb. Don't be dramatic." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You're screwing me again." "I'm not screwing you. I'm managing a project. There's a difference." Derek's tone shifted, became sharper. "You want to make a thing out of this? Fine. But remember who gave you a shot when no one else would." Caleb wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, he took a breath. "Monday. If it's not there by Monday, we're done." "It'll be there." Derek hung up. Mira was standing in the doorway when Caleb looked up. "He's stalling," she said. "I know." "You want me to call him?" "No, I'll handle it." Caleb rubbed his face. "I just need this to be over." "It will be." Mira crossed her arms. "But you need to be ready for the possibility that Derek's going to try to renegotiate the terms after the fact. He's done it before." "How do you know that?" "Because I pulled his contract history. He's got a pattern. Agrees to terms, delivers the work, then finds reasons to delay payment until the other party either gives up or settles for less." Caleb stared at her. "You pulled his contract history?" "Public records. Took about 20 minutes." She shrugged. "If he tries anything, we file a lien. It'll cost him more to fight it than to just pay you." Caleb didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned. "You're kind of terrifying, you know that?" Mira almost smiled. "I've been called worse." The weekend before the wedding, Caleb took Emma shopping for a dress. She hated shopping, which meant the trip devolved into her trying on exactly 2 dresses before declaring them both fine and asking if they could leave. Caleb caved. They stopped for ice cream on the way home, and Emma spent the ride back talking about a science project she was working on. Something about ecosystems and food chains. Caleb didn't follow all of it, but he liked listening to her talk. It reminded him of the version of Emma who existed before the divorce. The one who wasn't always watching him to see if he was about to fall apart. When they got back to the apartment, Mira was on the couch with her laptop, wearing the same oversized sweater she'd been living in for the past week. She looked up when they walked in. "Find a dress?" she asked. "2 of them," Emma said, "but I only liked one." "That's one more than I've got," Mira said. Emma frowned. "You don't have a dress for the wedding?" "I wasn't planning on going to a wedding when I packed my bag 6 months ago." Emma looked at Caleb. "Can we take Mira shopping?" Caleb opened his mouth to say that Mira was an adult who could shop for herself, but Mira cut him off. "I'd love that," she said, closing her laptop. which was how Caleb ended up spending his Sunday afternoon in a department store, sitting outside a dressing room while Emma and Mira debated the merits of various dresses like they were negotiating a hostage situation. "That one makes you look like a lawyer," Emma said through the door. "I was a lawyer, sort of." "Well, you're not anymore. Try the blue one." Caleb leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. This was not how he'd imagined his life going. When Mira finally emerged, she was wearing a dark blue dress that hit just below the knee. Simple, elegant, nothing flashy. She looked uncomfortable. "Well?" she asked. Emma gave her a thumbs up. "You look like a person who has her life together." "That's the goal." Mira glanced at Caleb. "What do you think?" Caleb realized he'd been staring. "It's good. You should get it." Mira looked at the price tag and winced. "I should not get it." "I'll cover it," Caleb said. "No." "Mira—" "I said no." She disappeared back into the dressing room. Emma leaned over to Caleb. "She's proud." "I noticed." "You're going to have to be sneaky about it." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Sneaky how?" Emma grinned. "I'll distract her. You buy the dress." It worked. Mira came out 10 minutes later in her regular clothes, and by the time she realized what had happened, they were already in the parking lot. "You didn't," she said, staring at the bag in Caleb's hand. "Emma made me do it." Emma didn't even try to look innocent. "You're welcome." Mira looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she just shook her head. "You two are going to be the death of me." Monday came and went. The payment from Derek didn't. Caleb called him Tuesday morning. The call went to voicemail. He tried again at noon. Same result. By Wednesday, Caleb was furious. He drove to Derek's office, a sleek glass building in the Pearl District, and waited in the lobby until Derek's assistant finally admitted he was in. Derek didn't look surprised when Caleb walked into his office. He looked annoyed. "I'm in the middle of something," Derek said, not standing up. "Where's my money?" "The client's still holding the final payment. I told you. You've been saying that for a week." "I checked with the client yesterday. They released the payment last Thursday." Derek's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Then there's a delay in processing." "There's no delay. You're sitting on it." "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact." Caleb leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. "You've got 48 hours. After that, I file a lien and make sure every contractor in this city knows you don't pay your debts." Derek stood up slowly. "You want to threaten me? Fine. But remember, I'm the one with the connections. I'm the one who brought you back into this industry. You file that lien, and I'll make sure you never work in this town again." Caleb didn't flinch. "Try it." He walked out before Derek could respond. By the time he got back to his truck, his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. He sat there for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm down. His phone buzzed. A text from Mira. "Did you punch him?" "No." Disappointed. Caleb almost laughed. He started the truck and headed home. The payment came through Friday morning. Every cent, plus a little extra that Caleb assumed was Derek's way of making the problem go away without admitting fault. Mira saw the notification before Caleb did. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop when he walked in, and she looked up with a satisfied expression. "He paid." "I see that." "Told you he would." Caleb poured himself coffee. "You think he's going to retaliate?" "Probably, but not right away. He'll wait until he thinks you've forgotten about it, then he'll find some way to make your life difficult." Mira closed her laptop. "That's how guys like Derek operate. They don't fight in the open. Good thing I've got you watching my back. Good thing." She stood up and stretched. "You ready for tomorrow?" "Tomorrow. The wedding." Caleb had been trying not to think about it. Not even a little. "Too bad. We're going anyway." Saturday morning came too fast. Caleb woke up to the sound of Emma singing in the shower, off-key and way too loud, and the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Mira was already dressed, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked nervous, which was unusual. Mira didn't do nervous. "You all right?" Caleb asked, pouring himself a cup. "Fine. just haven't been to a wedding in a while. You don't have to come if you don't want to. I know, but I told Emma I would, so I will. Caleb nodded. He understood that logic. Promises to kids were non-negotiable. They picked Emma up from Vanessa's house at noon. Vanessa answered the door in a silk robe, her hair in curlers, looking frazzled. "You're early," she said. "You said noon." "I said 12:30. "No, you said noon." Vanessa sighed, too stressed to argue. "Fine. Emma, your dad's here." Emma appeared a moment later in her dress, looking uncomfortable but determined. Vanessa barely glanced at Mira, but Caleb caught the flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Who's this?" Vanessa asked. "I'm Mira," Mira said evenly. "I'm a friend of Caleb's." Vanessa's expression cooled. "I see. Well, I'm sure we'll see you at the venue." The drive to the hotel was quiet. Emma sat in the back, fidgeting with her seatbelt. Mira stared out the window. Caleb focused on not turning the car around. The venue was a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Portland, all manicured lawns and white tents. Valets in bow ties directed traffic. A string quartet played somewhere in the distance. "This is ridiculous," Caleb muttered. "This is expensive," Mira corrected. They parked and walked toward the main tent. Caleb could already see the crowd. Men in tailored suits, women in designer dresses, everyone holding champagne flutes and laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny. This was Vanessa's world now, Graham's world. Caleb didn't belong here. But Emma was holding his hand and Mira was walking beside him, and that was enough to keep him moving forward. They found seats near the back, away from the main crowd. Emma spotted some of her cousins and ran off to join them. That left Caleb and Mira sitting side by side, watching the room fill up. "You see him yet?" Mira asked quietly. "Who?" "Jonathan Reese, the guy who called you." Caleb scanned the room. He had no idea what Jonathan Reese looked like. "No. He'll find you. Guys like that always do." The ceremony started 20 minutes late. Vanessa walked down the aisle on her father's arm, looking radiant in a dress that probably cost more than Caleb's truck. Graham stood at the altar, beaming, every inch the successful finance guy who'd won the prize. Caleb felt nothing. No jealousy, no anger, just a distant sort of relief that this part of his life was over. Beside him, Mira shifted in her seat. "You good?" she whispered. "Yeah. You?" "I've been to worse weddings." Caleb bit back a smile. The ceremony was short, polished, perfect. When it ended, everyone moved to the reception tent. Caleb grabbed a drink from the bar and found a quiet corner to stand in. That's when Jonathan Reese found him. He was in his mid-50s, tall, silver hair, the kind of presence that made people step aside when he walked past. He approached Caleb with a glass of whiskey and an easy smile. "Caleb Hayes," he said, extending a hand. Caleb shook it. "Mr. Reese." "Jonathan, please." He glanced at Mira, who'd appeared at Caleb's side. "And you are?" "Mira Lawson," she said, her tone polite but guarded. Jonathan's eyes sharpened just for a second, then the smile returned. "Lawson. That name sounds familiar." "I get that a lot." "I'm sure you do." Jonathan turned back to Caleb. "I wanted to talk to you about a project, something big, national scope, the kind of thing that could change the trajectory of your company." Caleb kept his expression neutral. "I'm listening." "Not here, too many ears." Jonathan handed him a business card. "Come by my office Monday. We'll talk details." "What kind of project?" "The kind that requires someone hungry, someone who's not afraid to take risks." Jonathan's gaze flicked to Mira again. "And someone with the right kind of support." Mira's expression didn't change, but Caleb felt the tension in her posture. "I'll think about it," Caleb said. "Don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." Jonathan raised his glass. "Enjoy the wedding." He walked away, leaving Caleb and Mira standing in the corner. "That felt like a trap," Mira said quietly. "Yeah, it did." "You going to his office?" Caleb thought about it. "Probably, but not alone." Mira nodded. "Good." The reception went on around them. Toasts were made, cake was cut. Vanessa and Graham danced under string lights while everyone clapped. Caleb found Emma near the dessert table, surrounded by cousins. She waved him over. "You having fun?" he asked. "It's okay. The cake's good." She looked past him. "Where's Mira?" "Outside, getting some air." Emma frowned. Is she okay? I think so. Why? She looked weird when that guy was talking to you. Caleb glanced toward the exit. I'll check on her. He found Mira standing by the edge of the lawn, staring out at the gardens. She didn't turn when he approached. You recognize him, Caleb said. It wasn't a question. Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Jonathan Reese was on the board of the firm I worked for in Seattle. He's the one who signed off on pinning the failed acquisition on me. Caleb's stomach dropped. He knows who you are. Yeah, he knows. Then why is he offering me a deal? Mira finally turned to look at him. Because he doesn't care about what happened to me. He cares about what I can do. And he knows I'm working with you. So this is about you. Partially. She crossed her arms. But it's also about you. You're exactly the kind of contractor he needs, desperate enough to take risks, competent enough to deliver, and isolated enough that no one will ask too many questions if things go wrong. Caleb felt cold. You think he's setting me up? I think he's testing you. And me. Mira's voice was steady, but there was something hard underneath. If you take that meeting, you need to know what you're walking into. Then come with me. Tell me what to watch for. Mira hesitated, then she nodded. All right, but we do this carefully. Jonathan doesn't make mistakes. If he's offering you something, it's because he's already 10 steps ahead. Caleb believed her. We'll figure it out. They stood there for a while, the sound of the party fading into the background. Then Emma appeared, running across the lawn with her dress hiked up to keep from tripping. Mom's about to throw the bouquet, she said breathlessly. Mira, you have to go catch it. Mira laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that Caleb had never heard before. I'm not catching a bouquet. Please? All the other ladies are so boring. Emma? Please? Mira looked at Caleb, who just shrugged. She sighed. Fine, but if I catch it, I'm throwing it right back. Emma dragged her toward the crowd of women gathering near the dance floor. Caleb followed, staying on the edge of the group. Vanessa stood at the center, her back to the crowd, bouquet raised. She counted down from 3 and threw it over her shoulder. The bouquet arced through the air, spinning in slow motion. Half a dozen women lunged for it, and then somehow it landed directly in Mira's hands. She looked down at it like it had personally offended her. The crowd erupted in applause. Vanessa turned around, saw who'd caught it, and her smile faltered for just a second. Emma cheered. I knew it! Mira handed the bouquet to the woman next to her. You can have it. But the damage was done. Everyone was looking at her now. At them. Caleb felt the shift in the room, the whispers, the curious glances. People were wondering who Mira was, what she was to him. Graham appeared beside Vanessa, whispering something in her ear. She nodded, her expression tight. Jonathan Reese watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. Caleb didn't care. He walked over to Mira and Emma and said, Let's get out of here. Neither of them argued. They left the reception early, piling into the truck and heading back toward the city. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window. Mira stared out the passenger window, quiet. You all right? Caleb asked. Yeah, just tired. That was a hell of a day. Yeah, it was. They drove in silence for a while. Then Mira said, Thank you. For what? For not leaving when things got weird. Caleb glanced at her. Why would I leave? Most people would have. I'm not most people. Mira smiled, small but real. No, you're not. When they got back to the apartment, Caleb carried Emma inside and put her to bed. She didn't wake up, just curled into her pillow and kept sleeping. Caleb found Mira in the kitchen, making tea. She handed him a cup without asking if he wanted one. Monday, she said. Monday, Caleb agreed. They sat at the table, drinking tea in the quiet of the apartment, and neither of them said what they were both thinking, that whatever came next, it was going to be bigger and messier than anything they'd faced so far. But they'd face it together. And for now, that was enough. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of Portland weather that made everything feel heavier than it was. Caleb stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. He hadn't worn a suit in over a year, and it showed. The jacket was a little loose in the shoulders, the pants a little short. He looked like a man playing dress-up. Mira appeared in the doorway, already dressed in dark slacks and a blazer. She looked like she'd never stopped working in boardrooms. "You look fine," she said. "I look like I'm going to a funeral." That's the point. Funerals and business meetings require the same level of respect for things that are already dead. She stepped into the bathroom and fixed his tie without asking. There. Better. Caleb watched her work, her hands quick and efficient. "You nervous?" "Terrified." "You don't look it." "That's the other thing I learned in Seattle. Never let them see you sweat." She stepped back. "Ready?" "No, but let's go anyway." They drove downtown in silence, the city waking up around them. Coffee shops opening, people hurrying to work. The usual Monday rhythm. Caleb felt disconnected from all of it, like he was watching a movie of someone else's life. Jonathan Reese's office was on the 23rd floor of a building that had more glass than seemed structurally necessary. The elevator ride up was smooth and silent. Mira stared at the floor numbers ticking by, her expression unreadable. "You sure about this?" Caleb asked. "No, but we're here now." The elevator doors opened into a lobby that screamed money. Marble floors, leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than Caleb's entire business. A receptionist with perfect hair and a practiced smile directed them to a conference room at the end of the hall. Jonathan was already there, sitting at the head of a long table with a laptop open in front of him. He stood when they entered, that same easy smile from the wedding firmly in place. "Caleb, Mira, good to see you both." He gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit." They sat. Jonathan closed his laptop and folded his hands on the table. "Let me get straight to it," he said. "I'm developing a series of mixed-use properties across the Pacific Northwest. Residential, commercial, some light industrial. The first phase is in Tacoma, the second in Spokane, the third back here in Portland." "That's a big scope," Caleb said. "It is. Which is why I need contractors who can move fast, stay under budget, and deliver quality work without constant oversight." Jonathan's gaze shifted to Mira. "And I need people who understand how to navigate complicated financial structures." Mira didn't react. "What kind of structures?" "Tax incentives, municipal bonds, private equity partnerships, the kind of thing that requires someone who can read between the lines." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "I understand you have experience in that area, Ms. Lawson." "I used to." "Used to," Jonathan repeated like he was tasting the words. "That's a shame. Someone with your skills shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines." Caleb felt the room shift, the conversation moving away from him and toward something he didn't fully understand. He glanced at Mira. Her expression was stone. "What exactly are you offering?" Caleb asked, pulling the focus back. Jonathan slid a folder across the table. "Phase 1, Tacoma Project. 4 buildings, 200 units total, 18-month timeline. I'm offering you the general contract." Caleb opened the folder. The numbers were staggering. Budget in the millions, timelines aggressive but doable, margins thin but real. "This is a lot of work," Caleb said slowly. "It is. But you've proven you can handle it. The project you just finished with Derek Lowe, solid work, on time, under budget, that's exactly what I need." Caleb wanted to believe it. But something about the way Jonathan was selling this felt off, like there was another conversation happening underneath the one they were having. "What's the catch?" Mira asked. Jonathan smiled. "No catch, just business." "There's always a catch." "All right, you want the truth?" Jonathan leaned forward. "The truth is, I've got investors breathing down my neck. They want results yesterday. I need someone who's hungry enough to move fast and smart enough not to cut corners. You two fit that profile." "And if we say no?" Caleb asked. "Then I find someone else. But I'd prefer to work with you." Jonathan's tone shifted, became more direct. "Look, I know what happened in Seattle, Mira. I know you got a raw deal, but that's in the past. This is a chance to move forward." Mira's jaw tightened. "You were part of the board that signed off on what happened to me." "I was, and I didn't fight it, which I regret." Jonathan held her gaze. "But I can't undo the past. All I can do is offer you a chance to prove that what happened to you doesn't define you." It was a good pitch. Too good. Caleb could see Mira processing it, weighing whether Jonathan was being sincere or just playing another angle. "We need time to think about it," Caleb said. "Of course. Take 48 hours. But after that, I need an answer. Jonathan stood, signaling the meeting was over. I'll have my assistant send over the full contract details. You'll see everything's above board. They shook hands and left. The elevator ride down was tense. Mira stared at the floor numbers again, her arms crossed tight. What do you think? Caleb asked. I think Jonathan Reese doesn't do anything unless it benefits him first. That doesn't mean it's a bad deal. No, but it means we need to be very, very careful. They stepped out into the lobby and headed for the parking garage. Caleb was about to say something when a woman in a navy suit intercepted them near the entrance. Mira Lawson, she said. Mira stopped. Yeah? The woman extended a hand. Claire Voss. I work for the Financial Oversight Division at the State Attorney General's office. Do you have a minute? Caleb's stomach dropped. Mira's expression didn't change, but he felt her tense beside him. What's this about? Mira asked. I'd rather discuss it somewhere private. Claire glanced at Caleb. If your associate doesn't mind. He's my business partner, Mira said flatly. Anything you say to me, you can say in front of him. Claire hesitated, then nodded. All right, we've been investigating Reese Capital Group for potential securities fraud. Your name came up in some old communications from your time in Seattle. I wanted to ask you a few questions. Mira's face went pale, just for a second, before the mask came back up. I don't work for that firm anymore. I know. But you were involved in the acquisition that's at the center of our investigation. I need to know what you remember about how that deal was structured. I was blamed for that deal falling apart. They fired me over it. I know, and that's actually why I'm here. Claire's voice softened slightly. We think you were set up to take the fall for something that was orchestrated at a much higher level. If you're willing to talk, it could help us build a case. Caleb watched Mira's face, saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. This was dangerous territory, but it was also a chance to clear her name. I need to think about it, Mira said. Claire handed her a business card. Call me when you're ready, but don't wait too long. These things have a way of disappearing if you let them. She walked away, leaving Caleb and Mira standing in the middle of the lobby. Well, Caleb said after a long silence, that complicates things. Mira let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Yeah, it does. They got in the truck and drove back to the apartment without talking. Caleb's mind was racing. If Reese Capital was under investigation, taking Jonathan's deal could mean walking straight into a federal case. But if they didn't take it, they were back to square one, scraping by, hoping the next contract didn't fall through. When they got home, Mira went straight to her laptop and started digging. Caleb made coffee and watched her work, the way she always did when she was trying to solve a problem. Focused, relentless, refusing to stop until she had answers. What are you looking for? Caleb asked. Anything that connects the Tacoma project to the acquisition I worked on in Seattle. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. If Jonathan's offering you this deal while he's under investigation, there's a reason. I need to figure out what it is. Caleb sat down across from her. You think he's using us? I think he's using you to move money in a way that looks legitimate, and he's using me because I know how the system works. She paused, staring at the screen. If we take this deal and it goes sideways, we don't just lose the contract. We become part of a federal investigation. And if we don't take it, then we keep struggling, and Jonathan finds someone else to exploit. Mira closed the laptop. Either way, he wins. Caleb hated that she was right. So what do? We play the game, but we play it smarter than he's expecting. How? Mira leaned back in her chair, thinking. We take the meeting with Claire Voss. We find out exactly what the state's looking into. Then we use that information to protect ourselves before we sign anything with Jonathan. You think Claire's legit? I don't know, but I'd rather talk to her than walk into Jonathan's trap blind. Caleb nodded. All right, set it up. Mira picked up Claire's business card and stared at it for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed. The meeting was set for Wednesday. 2 days to prepare, 2 days to figure out if they were about to make the smartest decision of their lives or the dumbest. Emma came over that night. She was quieter than usual, picking at her dinner and avoiding eye contact. You okay, kiddo? Caleb asked. Mom's mad at you. Caleb set down his fork. Why? Because of the wedding. She said you embarrassed her by bringing Mira. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. Mira didn't do anything wrong. I know, but Mom's still mad. Emma looked up at him, her eyes worried. She said if you keep acting weird, she's going to talk to the lawyer about custody. The words hit Caleb like a punch. She said that to you? No. I heard her on the phone with Graham. Caleb forced himself to stay calm. Emma, listen to me. Your mom's upset right now, but she's not going to take you away from me. I promise. But what if she does? She won't, because I'm not going to let that happen. Emma didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. Caleb glanced at Mira, who was standing in the kitchen doorway. She looked furious. After Emma went to bed, Mira paced the living room like a caged animal. She can't do that, Mira said. She can try. No, I mean legally, she can't just change custody because she's mad you brought a date to her wedding. I didn't bring a date. I brought a friend. You know what I mean? Mira stopped pacing. Vanessa's trying to control you. She wants you to stay small and broken so she can feel good about moving on. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. Mira crossed her arms. You need to document everything, every conversation, every threat, every time she tries to manipulate Emma. If she takes you to court, you need ammunition. Caleb didn't want to think about going to court. Didn't want to imagine fighting Vanessa for his daughter. But Mira was right. He couldn't just hope Vanessa would back off. He had to be ready. All right, he said. I'll start keeping records. Good. Mira sat down on the couch. And when we meet with Claire on Wednesday, we ask her if she knows any family lawyers, just in case. Caleb nodded. The weight of it all was starting to press down on him. Jonathan's deal, the investigation, Vanessa's threats. It felt like the walls were closing in from every direction. But then he looked at Mira, sitting there with that fierce determination in her eyes, and he remembered that he wasn't doing this alone. Thanks, he said. For what? For not running when things got complicated. Mira gave him a small smile. Where would I even go? Wednesday came too fast. They met Claire at a quiet cafe on the east side, away from downtown and the people who might recognize them. Claire was already there when they arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a thick folder. She stood when she saw them. Thanks for coming. They sat. Claire slid the folder across the table. This is everything we have on Reese Capital's Seattle operations from 3 years ago. The acquisition you were involved in, Mira. It was structured to hide the fact that Jonathan and his partners were using investor funds to cover personal debts. Mira opened the folder and scanned the documents. Her face went pale. I didn't know about this, she said quietly. We know. That's why they pinned it on you. You were junior enough to be expendable, but senior enough to look credible. Claire leaned forward. If you testify about what you saw, it could help us prove that Jonathan orchestrated the whole thing. And if I don't, then we keep building the case without you. But it'll take longer, and Jonathan will keep operating the way he always has. Caleb watched Mira process this. He could see the conflict written all over her face, the desire for justice warring with the fear of getting dragged back into a world she'd barely escaped. What about the Tacoma project? Caleb asked. Is that part of the fraud? Claire hesitated. We don't know yet. It could be legitimate, or it could be another shell game. That's what we're trying to figure out. So if we take the contract, we're walking into an investigation. Potentially, but if you don't take it, Jonathan will find someone else, and we'll lose a potential source of evidence. Mira looked at Caleb. He wants us to be his eyes on the inside. Claire didn't deny it. I won't lie to you. If you take that contract, anything you see or hear could be used in our case. But I'll also make sure you're protected. No criminal liability, full immunity in exchange for cooperation. Caleb felt sick. This wasn't a business opportunity anymore. It was an undercover operation. We need time to think, Mira said. I understand, but I need an answer by Friday. That's when Jonathan wants your decision, right? Mira nodded. They left the cafe and sat in the truck for a long time, neither of them speaking. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. This is insane. Yeah. We could just walk away, tell Jonathan no, tell Claire no, and go back to scraping by. We could. Mira turned to look at him. But then what? Jonathan keeps scamming people. Vanessa keeps threatening you. We keep barely surviving. And if we do this, if we say yes to both of them, then we take the biggest risk of our lives, and maybe, we come out the other side with something better. Caleb wanted to argue. wanted to find a third option that didn't involve federal investigations and custody battles and deals with people he didn't trust. But there wasn't one. There was only the choice in front of them. "All right," he said. "Let's do it." Mira exhaled slowly. "Okay." They called Claire that night and agreed to cooperate. She sent over immunity agreements and instructions on how to document anything suspicious. It felt like crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Thursday, Caleb called Jonathan and accepted the Tacoma contract. Jonathan sounded pleased, almost too pleased, like he'd been expecting this all along. "Excellent. I'll have the paperwork sent over by end of day. We start in 2 weeks." "Understood." "And Caleb? Thank you for trusting me. I think we're going to do great things together." Caleb hung up and stared at the phone. He didn't feel good about this, but he also didn't see another way forward. The paperwork arrived Friday morning. Mira spent the entire day going through it, line by line, looking for traps. She found a few: clauses that gave Jonathan too much control, payment structures that were too vague, and redlined them all. "Send it back like this," she said. "If he agrees, we know he's serious. If he fights it, we know he's hiding something." Caleb sent the redlined contract back. Jonathan's response came an hour later. "Agreed. Let's build something great." Mira stared at the email. He caved too fast. Maybe he's just being reasonable. Or maybe he doesn't care about the contract terms because he's planning to break them anyway. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. That weekend, Emma came over again. She seemed lighter, less worried. Caleb didn't know if Vanessa had backed off or if Emma was just better at hiding her anxiety. They spent Saturday at the park, just the three of them. Emma ran ahead, chasing pigeons and climbing on things she probably shouldn't. Mira walked beside Caleb, hands in her pockets. "You ever think about what happens if this all works out?" Caleb asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if we pull this off. If the deal goes through, if Jonathan gets arrested, if Vanessa leaves us alone, what happens after that?" Mira was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. I haven't let myself think that far ahead." "Why not?" "Because every time I've planned for the future, it's fallen apart. So I stopped planning." Caleb understood that. "Maybe it's time to start again." Mira glanced at him. "Maybe." Emma ran back to them, out of breath and grinning. "Can we get ice cream?" "It's freezing out," Caleb said. "So? Ice cream doesn't care about the weather." Mira laughed. She's got a point. They got ice cream, sat on a bench in the cold, eating it too fast and complaining about brain freeze. For a few minutes, everything felt normal, like they were just three people enjoying a Saturday afternoon. But Monday was coming, and with it, the Tacoma project, and whatever chaos that was going to bring. Caleb looked at Mira, who was watching Emma with something soft in her expression. And he thought, not for the first time, that maybe the reason he'd stopped on that highway 6 months ago wasn't luck. Maybe it was the only thing that had gone right in a very long time. The Tacoma project started on a Tuesday that felt more like a warning than a beginning. Caleb drove up early, Mira in the passenger seat with her laptop open, reviewing supplier contracts and budget projections for the third time that morning. The rain hammered the windshield hard enough that the wipers could barely keep up. "You didn't have to come," Caleb said. "Yes, I did." Mira didn't look up from the screen. "If something's wrong with this project, I'll see it faster on site than I will from your apartment." "You think something's wrong?" "I think Jonathan Reese doesn't spend $3 million on a project just to be nice." They arrived at the site just after 8. It was a massive lot near the waterfront, 4 empty concrete slabs waiting to become buildings. A crew of about 30 workers stood around in clusters, drinking coffee and looking skeptical. Caleb's foreman, a guy named Ray, who'd worked with him back when the business was still his father's, walked over as soon as Caleb stepped out of the truck. "Boss," Ray said, shaking his hand, "hell of a project." "Yeah, you ready for it?" "Ask me in a month." Ray glanced at Mira. "Who's this?" "Mira Lawson. She's handling logistics and contracts." Ray raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. "Well, we've got our first problem already." "Of course we do. What is it?" "Permits. City says we're missing 2 of them. Won't let us start foundation work until they're filed." Caleb felt his jaw tighten. "Jonathan said all the permits were cleared." "Yeah, well, the city disagrees." Mira was already on her phone. "I'll call the permitting office. Give me 20 minutes." She walked away, phone pressed to her ear, her voice shifting into that sharp, professional tone she used when she needed people to take her seriously. Ray watched her go. She always like that? Pretty much. Good. We're going to need it. By noon, Mira had sorted the permit issue. Turned out Jonathan's team had filed the wrong forms and never followed up. She spent the next 2 hours on the phone with city officials, contractors, and Jonathan's assistant, her patience wearing thinner with each call. When she finally came back to where Caleb was overseeing the foundation prep, she looked exhausted. It's fixed, she said, but Jonathan's people are sloppy, really sloppy. Incompetent or intentional? I don't know yet, but I'm documenting everything. That became the rhythm of the next 2 weeks. Problems would surface, wrong materials delivered, budget discrepancies, unclear instructions from Jonathan's office, and Mira would fix them while Caleb kept the crew moving. It was exhausting, but it was working. Then Claire Voss called. Caleb was in the middle of a concrete pour when his phone buzzed. He almost didn't answer, but something told him he should. Caleb, it's Claire. I need you and Mira to come to Portland this weekend. We found something. What kind of something? The kind I can't discuss over the phone. Can you make it Saturday morning? Caleb glanced at the crew, at the work that still needed to happen. Yeah, we'll be there. He told Mira that night back at the motel they'd been staying at during the week. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, going through receipts and invoices, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Claire wants to meet Saturday, Caleb said. Mira looked up. She find something? Yeah. Good or bad? She wouldn't say. Mira set down the papers. Then it's bad. They drove back to Portland on Friday night, the highway dark and empty. Caleb's mind was racing with worst-case scenarios. Mira stared out the window, silent. You scared? Caleb asked. Terrified. You don't look it. I've had a lot of practice hiding it. They met Claire at a coffee shop in southeast Portland, the kind of place that smelled like burnt espresso and pretension. Claire was already there, sitting in a back corner with a folder in front of her. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. We traced the funding for the Tacoma project. It's coming from an offshore account that's linked to the same network Jonathan used in the Seattle fraud. Mira's face went pale. So the project's dirty? Not necessarily. The money itself might be clean, real investor capital. But the way it's being moved suggests Jonathan's setting up the same kind of shell game he used before. He funnels money through the project, skims off the top, and if it collapses, the contractors take the blame. Caleb felt cold. So we're the fall guys. If the project fails, yes, but if it succeeds, Jonathan looks like a genius and you get paid. It's a win-win for him either way. Except if it fails, we don't just lose money, Mira said. We lose everything. Our reputations, our ability to work, maybe our freedom if the feds decide we were complicit. Claire nodded. That's why I need you to be careful. Every invoice, every payment, every conversation with Jonathan or his team, document it. If this goes sideways, that documentation is the only thing standing between you and a courtroom. Caleb wanted to walk away right then. Wanted to call Jonathan, tell him to shove his contract, and go back to scraping by on small jobs. But he knew what that would mean. More struggling, more barely surviving, more watching Emma wonder if her dad was ever going to get his life together. We keep going, Caleb said. Mira looked at him. You sure? No, but we're already in it. Might as well see it through. Claire handed them a small recording device, no bigger than a thumb drive. Keep this on you when you're meeting with Jonathan's people. It'll pick up conversations from up to 15 feet away. Just press the button on the side to activate it. Caleb stared at the device. You want us to wear a wire. I want you to protect yourselves. If Jonathan or anyone on his team says something incriminating, you'll have proof you weren't part of it. Mira took the device. And if they find it, then you tell them it's a backup recorder for meeting notes. Plausible deniability. They left the coffee shop feeling like they'd just signed up for something way over their heads. Because they had. Back in Tacoma, the project started hitting its stride. The foundation work finished ahead of schedule. The framing crews were efficient. For a few days, it felt like maybe this would actually work out. Then Jonathan showed up unannounced. Caleb was on site, walking the second building's framework with Ray, when a black SUV pulled into the lot. Jonathan stepped out, dressed in a suit that had no business being on a construction site. Caleb, he called, waving him over. Caleb exchanged a glance with Ray, then walked over. Mira appeared from the side office, her expression guarded. Jonathan, didn't know you were coming. Oh, thought I'd check on my investment, see how things are progressing. Jonathan looked around, nodding approvingly. Looks good. You're ahead of schedule. For now. Don't be modest. You're doing great work. Jonathan's gaze shifted to Mira. Both of you. Mira didn't respond. She had the recording device in her jacket pocket, and Caleb could see her hand hovering near it. Jonathan gestured toward the site office. Can we talk inside for a minute? Caleb nodded. They followed him into the trailer, and Jonathan closed the door behind them. I wanted to give you a heads up, Jonathan said, leaning against the desk. I'm bringing in a financial auditor next week. Standard procedure for projects this size. They'll review the books, make sure everything's on track. Caleb felt his stomach drop. We've been keeping detailed records. Everything's clean. I'm sure it is, but my investors like to see third-party verification. Jonathan smiled. Nothing to worry about, just a formality. Mira's voice was calm, but Caleb could hear the edge underneath. Who's the auditor? Firm called Brennan and Associates. They've worked with me before. Very thorough. I'd like their contact information, so I can send over our records in advance. Jonathan's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. Of course. I'll have my assistant send it over. He left a few minutes later. As soon as the SUV was out of sight, Mira pulled out the recording device and played back the conversation. Jonathan's voice came through clear. I'm bringing in a financial auditor next week. Mira stopped the playback. He's checking to see if we're skimming, or he's setting us up, Caleb said. Brings in his own auditor. They find discrepancies that don't exist, and suddenly we're the ones who look dirty. Either way, we need to be ready. Mira sat down at the desk and opened her laptop. I'm going to pull every receipt, every invoice, every bank statement we have. If there's a single dollar that doesn't line up, I need to find it before they do. She worked through the night. Caleb tried to help, but Mira was operating on a level he couldn't match. She cross-referenced payments, flagged inconsistencies, built spreadsheets that tracked every transaction down to the cent. By morning, she had a file 3 inches thick. Everything checks out, she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. We're clean. You sure? I'm sure. The auditor arrived the following Monday. His name was Peter Brennan, a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the demeanor of someone who enjoyed finding mistakes. He set up in the site office and spent 3 days going through every document Mira handed him. Caleb tried to work, tried to keep the crew focused, but the weight of Brennan's presence hung over everything. Mira barely left the office, answering Brennan's questions with a patience Caleb didn't know she had. On the 3rd day, Brennan called them both in. I finished my review, he said, closing his laptop. Everything appears to be in order. Caleb felt relief wash over him. So we're good. For now. But I did notice a few irregularities in the payment structure from Mr. Reese's office. Delays in fund transfers, inconsistencies in budget allocations. Nothing that reflects poorly on you, but it does raise questions about the financial oversight on his end. Mira leaned forward. What kind of questions? Brennan hesitated. Off the record, I've worked with Jonathan Reese before, and every time there are issues like this, small things that add up, if I were you, I'd make sure you have a very clear paper trail for every dollar that comes in and every dollar that goes out. We do, Mira said. Good. Keep it that way. Brennan stood. I'll submit my report to Mr. Reese by end of week. You should be fine. After he left, Mira and Caleb sat in the office, the silence heavy between them. He just warned us, Caleb said. Yeah, he did. You think he knows what Jonathan's doing? I think he's seen it before and doesn't want to be part of it again. Caleb's phone buzzed, a text from Emma. Mom's being weird again. Can I come stay with you this weekend? Caleb showed the message to Mira. She frowned. What's going on with Vanessa? I don't know, but I need to get back to Portland. They drove back Friday night, exhaustion weighing on both of them. When they got to the apartment, Emma was already there, sitting on the front steps with her backpack. How'd you get here? Caleb asked. Mom dropped me off, said she had plans. Caleb felt anger flare up, but he pushed it down. Come on, let's get inside. Emma was quiet through dinner, picking at her food the way she did when something was bothering her. "You want to talk about it?" Caleb asked. "Mom's getting mean." "Mean how?" "She keeps saying stuff about you. About how you're never going to be successful. About how I shouldn't get my hopes up that things are going to get better." Caleb felt his hands curl into fists under the table. "She said that to you?" "Not to me. But I heard her on the phone with Graham. She said you were going to mess up the Tacoma thing, and then you'd be right back where you started." Mira's expression went hard. "She's trying to sabotage you." "She's just upset," Caleb said, though he didn't believe it. "No, she's threatened." Mira looked at Emma. "Your dad's doing well, better than he has in a long time, and your mom doesn't know how to deal with that." Emma nodded slowly. "I think she's scared I'm going to want to live with you instead of her." Caleb's heart clenched. "Is that what you want?" Emma looked down at her plate. "I don't know, I just want things to feel normal again." Caleb reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out. I promise." That weekend, Caleb got a call from his lawyer, a guy named Marcus Chen who'd helped him with the divorce. Marcus sounded concerned. "Vanessa's attorney reached out. She's filing a motion to modify custody." Caleb's blood went cold. "On what grounds?" "She's claiming your work situation is unstable and that you're not providing a consistent environment for Emma." "That's bullshit. I've got steady work for the first time in a year." "I know, but she's also claiming that you're involving Emma in an unstable living situation by having Mira in the home." Caleb felt rage build in his chest. "Mira's a friend. She's been nothing but good to Emma." "I believe you. But Vanessa's painting it differently. Says she's concerned about Emma being around someone with an unclear role in your life." "So what do? We fight it. But you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Vanessa's serious." Caleb hung up and told Mira. She listened without interrupting, her jaw tight. "She's doing this because of the wedding," Mira said. "Because we showed up together and people noticed." "I know." "So what are you going to do?" Caleb didn't know, but he knew he wasn't going to let Vanessa take Emma away from him. The custody hearing was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, the Tacoma project kept moving. Buildings went up, inspections passed, money flowed in and out, and every transaction was documented. Then, 2 weeks before the hearing, Jonathan called a meeting. Caleb and Mira drove to his office, the recording device in Mira's pocket. Jonathan greeted them with his usual smooth confidence. "I wanted to talk about Phase 2, he said. "Spokane. I'm accelerating the timeline. I want to break ground in 6 weeks. Caleb blinked. "That's not possible. We're still finishing Tacoma. Which is why I'm bringing in a second crew. You oversee both. Double the work, double the pay." Mira's voice was careful. "That's a lot of risk." "It's a lot of opportunity." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "I've got investors lined up. Money's ready to go. All I need is your commitment." Caleb looked at Mira. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. "We need time to think about it," Caleb said. Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." They left the office and sat in the truck, the engine running. "He's pushing too hard," Mira said. "Yeah. Which means he's desperate, or he's setting us up for something bigger." Caleb's phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "We need to meet, now." They met her at the same coffee shop. Claire looked grim. "We got a warrant to search Reese Capital's financial records. What we found is worse than we thought." "How much worse?" Mira asked. "Jonathan's been using investor money to pay off personal debts. The Tacoma project? Half the budget is fake. He's inflating costs, skimming the difference, and using your work to make it look legitimate." Caleb felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "So everything we've built is being used to commit fraud. And if we don't move fast, you're going to be named as co-conspirators." Mira's voice was ice. "What do we do?" "You keep working, keep documenting, and when we're ready to move, you testify." Caleb wanted to scream, wanted to walk away from all of it, but he couldn't. Because if he did, Vanessa would win. Jonathan would win, and Emma would grow up thinking her father was just another failure. So he nodded. "All right, we're in." Claire handed them a new recording device. "Use this at the next meeting. We need him on record discussing the financial structure." They drove back to Tacoma in silence. The weight of what they'd agreed to pressed down on both of them. That night, lying in his motel bed, Caleb stared at the ceiling and wondered how his life had gotten so complicated. His phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "I love you, Dad. Don't give up." Caleb closed his eyes. He wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in downtown Portland. Caleb sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, his lawyer beside him, going over last-minute details that all sounded like noise. His mind was somewhere else, on the Tacoma project, on the recording device he'd been wearing for the past week, on the fact that his entire life seemed to be unraveling in 3 different directions at once. Vanessa arrived 15 minutes early, Graham at her side. She looked polished and confident, like someone who'd already won. Graham nodded at Caleb once, a gesture that managed to be both polite and dismissive. Marcus leaned over. "Remember, stay calm. Don't react to anything she says. Just answer the questions truthfully." "I know. And if they bring up Mira Chabot—" "I know, Marcus." The courtroom doors opened. They filed inside, taking their places on opposite sides of the aisle like a wedding in reverse. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 60s who seemed deeply uninterested in the theatrics of divorce court. Vanessa's lawyer went first, painting a picture of Caleb as unstable, unreliable, someone whose recent business success was too new to be trusted. He brought up the failed company, the debts, the months when Caleb could barely afford rent. Then he brought up Mira. "And who is this woman living in Mr. Hayes's home?" Vanessa's lawyer asked. "What role does she play in Emma's life?" Marcus objected. The judge allowed the question. Caleb kept his voice steady. "Mira Lawson is my business partner. She helps manage contracts and logistics. She's also a friend. A friend who lives with you. Temporarily. She needed a place to stay. I had space. And you believe this arrangement is appropriate for a young child?" "Yes. Mira's been nothing but kind to Emma. She's been a positive influence." Vanessa's lawyer moved on, but the damage was done. The implication hung in the air that Caleb's home was chaotic, his judgment questionable. Then it was Marcus's turn. He called Caleb to the stand and walked him through the past 6 months. The business recovery, the Tacoma project, the steady paychecks. He presented bank statements, contracts, letters from Emma's teacher praising Caleb's involvement in her schoolwork. "Mr. Hayes," Marcus said, "in your own words, what kind of father do you want to be?" Caleb thought about Emma sitting on the couch watching movies, about her asking if Mira could stay, about the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. "I want to be the kind of father who shows up," Caleb said. "Not perfect, not always right, but someone who's there when it matters. Someone she can count on." Marcus nodded. No further questions. Vanessa took the stand next. Her lawyer asked her about her concerns, and she delivered them with practiced emotion. She worried about Emma's stability. She worried about the influence of strangers. She worried that Caleb's recent success was fragile and that when it collapsed, Emma would be caught in the fallout. When Marcus cross-examined her, he was surgical. "Miss Whitmore, when was the last time you asked Emma what she wanted?" Vanessa hesitated. "I talk to Emma every day." "That's not what I asked. When did you last ask her where she wanted to live, who she wanted to spend time with?" "She's 8 years old. She doesn't get to make that decision." "But her feelings matter, don't they?" "Of course they do." "Then why didn't you ask her before filing this motion?" Vanessa's composure cracked just slightly. "Because I'm her mother. I know what's best for her." Marcus let that sit for a moment. Then he said, "No further questions." The judge called a recess to review the evidence. Caleb and Marcus stepped into the hallway. Caleb felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "How do you think it went?" Caleb asked. "Better than I expected." Vanessa came off defensive. The judge noticed. But it could go either way. Custody modifications are hard to predict." They waited for an hour. When they were called back in, the judge delivered her ruling without preamble. "Based on the evidence presented, I see no compelling reason to modify the existing custody arrangement. Mr. Hayes has demonstrated financial stability and a commitment to his daughter's well-being. The motion is denied." Caleb felt relief crash over him like a wave. Vanessa's face went tight, her lawyer already whispering something in her ear about appeals. Outside the courtroom, Marcus shook Caleb's hand. "You got lucky." "I know. Don't give her a reason to come back at you. Keep everything clean. Keep everything documented. Caleb nodded. He knew the fight wasn't over. It probably never would be. But he'd won this round. And that was enough. He called Mira from the parking garage. She answered on the first ring. Well, we won. He could hear the relief in her voice. Good. When are you coming back? Tonight. Jonathan wants a meeting tomorrow. Says it's urgent. Of course he does. Mira paused. You ready? No, but we're doing it anyway. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon at Jonathan's office. Caleb and Mira arrived together, the recording device hidden in Caleb's jacket pocket. Jonathan greeted them with his usual charm, but there was something different in his demeanor, an edge, a tightness around his eyes. Thanks for coming on short notice, Jonathan said, gesturing them to sit. We need to talk about Phase 2. We haven't agreed to Phase 2 yet, Caleb said. I know, but circumstances have changed. I need to accelerate the timeline. Why? Jonathan leaned back in his chair. My investors are getting nervous. They want to see faster returns. If we don't deliver, they pull funding. And if they pull funding, the Tacoma project stalls. Mira's voice was calm. That sounds like a problem with your investors, not with us. It's a problem for all of us, which is why I'm proposing we restructure the payment terms for Spokane. Front-load your fees, get you paid up front, so there's no risk on your end. Caleb felt alarm bells going off. Why would you do that? Because I need you committed, and because I can't afford delays. Mira glanced at Caleb, then back at Jonathan. We need to see the revised contract before we agree to anything. Of course, I'll have my team draft it this weekend. Jonathan stood, signaling the meeting was over. I know this is moving fast, but trust me, this is going to work out for everyone. They left the office and sat in the truck, Caleb's hand shaking slightly as he turned off the recording device. He's panicking, Mira said. Yeah. Which means Claire was right. The money's running out, and he's trying to lock us into something before it all collapses. Caleb called Claire from the truck. She answered immediately. We just met with Jonathan. He's trying to restructure the Spokane deal, wants to front-load our payments. That's a red flag. He's moving money around to cover losses. Did you record it? Yeah? Good. Send it to me, and whatever you do, don't sign anything until I've reviewed it. They sent the recording. Claire called back an hour later. This is exactly what we needed. Jonathan just admitted his investors are pulling out. That's proof he's operating on borrowed time. So what happens now? Caleb asked. Now we move. I'm filing charges next week. But I need you two to keep playing along until then. If Jonathan suspects something, he'll disappear, and we'll lose him. Caleb felt sick. How much longer? 5 days, maybe 6. Can you hold out that long? Caleb looked at Mira. She nodded. Yeah, Caleb said. We can hold out. The next 5 days were the longest of Caleb's life. He and Mira went through the motions, showed up at the Tacoma site, managed the crew, kept the project moving. But every conversation felt loaded. Every interaction with Jonathan's team felt like walking through a minefield. On Tuesday, Jonathan sent over the revised Spokane contract. Mira spent 2 days tearing it apart, finding every clause that would trap them if the project went south. It's worse than I thought, she said, showing Caleb the highlighted sections. If we sign this and the project fails, we're liable for Jonathan's debts. He's not just setting us up as fall guys. He's making sure we can't walk away. So we don't sign. We can't not sign without tipping him off. We need to stall. They sent Jonathan a list of revisions, minor enough to seem reasonable, but detailed enough to buy time. Jonathan's response came back terse and impatient, but he agreed to another meeting. That meeting was scheduled for Thursday, the same day Claire planned to move. Caleb and Mira arrived at Jonathan's office just before noon. The receptionist looked nervous, her usual polished demeanor replaced with something jittery. She directed them to the conference room without her usual small talk. Jonathan was already there, but he wasn't alone. 2 men in suits sat on either side of him, their expressions unreadable. Caleb, Mira, thanks for coming, Jonathan said. His smile was strained. These are my attorneys. We're finalizing the Spokane terms today. Caleb felt his pulse spike. We haven't agreed to the terms yet. I know, but we're out of time. I need a commitment today, or I'm moving on to another contractor. Mira's voice was ice. That's not how contracts work, Jonathan. It is when you're working with my money. One of the lawyers slid a document across the table. This is the final contract. Sign it now, and we move forward. Walk away, and you forfeit your remaining payments on the Tacoma project. Caleb stared at the contract. This was it. The trap closing. He was about to speak when the conference room door opened. Claire Voss walked in, flanked by two federal agents. Jonathan's face went white. "Jonathan Reese," Claire said, her voice formal and cold. "You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." One of the agents stepped forward and cuffed Jonathan while the other recited his rights. Jonathan's lawyers immediately started objecting, demanding to see warrants, threatening lawsuits. Claire ignored them. She turned to Caleb and Mira. "You two are free to go. We'll need formal statements later this week, but you're not being charged." Caleb felt like he couldn't breathe. "It's over? For you? Yeah, it's over." Claire nodded toward the door. "Go home." They walked out of the building in a daze. The sun was too bright, the air too cold, everything too sharp and real. Mira stopped on the sidewalk and let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "We did it." "Yeah, we did." They drove back to Portland in silence, the weight of the past month slowly lifting. When they got back to the apartment, Emma was there, sitting on the couch doing homework. She looked up when they walked in. "You guys look weird." "Good weird or bad weird?" Caleb asked. "I don't know yet." Caleb sat down beside her. "It's good weird. Things are going to be okay." Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." That night, after Emma went to bed, Caleb and Mira sat on the small balcony of the apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "What happens to the Tacoma project?" Mira asked. "I don't know. Claire said the feds are going to sort through Jonathan's finances. If the funding was legitimate, they'll find a way to finish it. If it wasn't, it gets shut down." "And us?" "We walk away clean, maybe even get paid what we're owed if the receivership works out." Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I didn't think we'd make it." "Me neither. But we did. Yeah, we did." 2 weeks later, Caleb got a call from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Hayes, this is Richard Mendoza. I'm with Cascade Development Group. I was reviewing the Tacoma project files as part of the federal investigation, and I wanted to talk to you about something." Caleb's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" "The good kind. Your work on that project was exceptional. Clean execution, solid financials, ahead of schedule despite the chaos. I'm putting together a bid for a public works contract in Portland, and I'd like you to be the lead contractor." Caleb blinked. "You want to hire me?" "If you're interested, it's a 2-year project, solid budget, city oversight, so there's no risk of the kind of mess you just dealt with." Caleb didn't know what to say. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but don't take too long. The bid deadline's in 3 weeks." Caleb hung up and stared at the phone. Mira walked into the kitchen and saw his expression. "What happened?" "I just got offered a contract, a real one. Clean, legitimate, no hidden agendas." Mira's face broke into a genuine smile. "That's incredible." "Yeah, it is." They talked through the details that night, going over the scope, the budget, the timeline. It was everything Caleb had hoped for when he took over his father's business, a chance to build something real, something that mattered. The formal statements to the federal investigators took another 2 weeks. Caleb and Mira sat in a conference room and walked through everything, the contracts, the recordings, the red flags they'd documented. Claire thanked them for their cooperation and assured them that Jonathan would be going to prison for a long time. "What about the people he scammed?" Mira asked. "We're working on restitution. It'll take time, but we'll get some of the money back to the investors." Mira nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. By late spring, Caleb had signed the contract with Cascade Development. The project was everything Richard had promised, complex, challenging, but fair. Mira officially joined as a partner, handling contracts and financial oversight. Emma started spending more time at the apartment. Vanessa didn't fight it. She'd remarried, moved on, and seemed content to let Caleb have more custody as long as it didn't interfere with her new life. One Saturday afternoon, Caleb and Emma were at the park, sitting on a bench while Mira chased pigeons with an enthusiasm that was both ridiculous and endearing. "Dad?" Emma said. "Yeah?" "Are you and Mira going to get married?" Caleb choked on his coffee. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" Because you act like you're married. You just don't kiss or anything. We're partners, business partners. Emma gave him a look that was way too knowing for an 8-year-old. Sure, Dad. Caleb didn't know how to respond to that. So he just watched Mira, who was now trying to convince a particularly stubborn pigeon to move out of her way, and thought about how 6 months ago his life had been falling apart. Now it wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and still full of problems. But it was his, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch and Mira was cleaning up the kitchen, Caleb found himself thinking about what it all meant. He'd spent so long trying to get back to where he was before everything fell apart, trying to rebuild the business, rebuild his reputation, rebuild his life into something that looked like success. But the truth was, he didn't want that life back. That life had been built on shaky foundations, on trying to be someone he wasn't, on chasing a version of success that had never really fit him. This life, the one he had now, was different. It was smaller in some ways, quieter, but it was real. It was built on trust, on partnership, on showing up even when things got hard. Mira walked over and sat down beside him. You look like you're thinking too hard. Just reflecting. On what? Caleb thought about it. On how sometimes losing everything is the only way to figure out what actually matters. Mira nodded. Yeah, I know that feeling. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Mira said, Thank you. For what? For stopping on that highway. For giving me a chance when you had every reason not to. Caleb looked at her. You gave me a chance too, when no one else would. I guess we're even then. Yeah, I guess we are. 3 months later, the Portland project was in full swing. Caleb's crew was strong, the budget was on track, and for the first time in years, Caleb felt like he knew what he was doing. Vanessa invited him to a school event for Emma, a science fair where Emma was presenting a project about ecosystems. Caleb went, expecting it to be awkward, but Vanessa was civil, almost friendly. Graham shook his hand and asked about the business with what seemed like genuine interest. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close to peace. Emma won 3rd place for her project. She ran over to Caleb afterward, trophy in hand, grinning so wide it made his chest ache. Did you see? She asked. I saw. You were amazing. Mira helped me with the research. Caleb glanced over at Mira, who was standing near the back of the room, trying to blend into the crowd. She gave him a small wave. She's pretty great, huh? Caleb said. Yeah, she is. Emma looked up at him. Are you happy, Dad? Caleb thought about the question. A year ago, he would have said no without hesitation. But now? Yeah, kiddo, I think I am. Emma hugged him. Good. You deserve to be happy. That night, Caleb and Mira sat on the balcony again, the city lights stretched out below them. You ever think about what comes next? Mira asked. Sometimes, but I'm trying not to plan too far ahead. Last time I did that, it all fell apart. Fair point. What about you? You going to stick around? Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Yeah, I think I am. Good. They sat there for a long time, not talking, just existing in the same space. And Caleb realized that this quiet, imperfect, complicated life was exactly what he'd been searching for. He'd spent so long trying to prove he wasn't broken, trying to show Vanessa, show the world, show himself that he could bounce back, that he could be successful again. But the truth was, he had been broken. And maybe that was okay, because being broken meant he'd had to rebuild from scratch. And in rebuilding, he'd found something better than what he'd lost. He'd found people who showed up when things got hard. He'd found work that mattered. He'd found a version of himself that didn't need to be perfect to be worthwhile. And maybe that was the real lesson, that success isn't about getting back to where you were. It's about building something new from the pieces that are left. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about trusting the people who choose to stand beside you when everyone else walks away. It's about realizing that the life you build after everything falls apart can be better than the one you lost. Not because it's easier or prettier or more successful, but because it's real. And real, Caleb had learned, was worth more than perfect ever was. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Caleb woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Emma and Mira arguing about whether chocolate chips belonged in breakfast food. He lay there for a moment, listening to them, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not happiness, exactly. Not the kind of bright, shiny emotion that comes from winning or succeeding or proving someone wrong, but something quieter. Something that felt like home. He got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. Emma was sitting at the table with a plate stacked high with pancakes. Mira was at the stove, spatula in hand, looking triumphant. "Chocolate chips won," Mira announced. "They always do," Caleb said. Emma grinned. "Can we go to the park after breakfast?" "Sure." They ate together, the three of them, talking about nothing important. And Caleb thought about how, a year ago, he'd been sitting in his truck outside a shuttered storefront, staring at final notices and wondering if he'd ever feel whole again. He hadn't known then that wholeness wasn't about getting back what you lost. It was about learning to build something new with what you had left. And he had plenty. He had a daughter who believed in him. He had work that mattered. He had a partner who'd stood beside him when everything was falling apart and never once suggested walking away. He had a life that wasn't perfect, but it was his. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in downtown Portland. Caleb sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, his lawyer beside him, going over last-minute details that all sounded like noise. His mind was somewhere else, on the Tacoma project, on the recording device he'd been wearing for the past week, on the fact that his entire life seemed to be unraveling in 3 different directions at once. Vanessa arrived 15 minutes early, Graham at her side. She looked polished and confident, like someone who'd already won. Graham nodded at Caleb once, a gesture that managed to be both polite and dismissive. Marcus leaned over. "Remember, stay calm. Don't react to anything she says. Just answer the questions truthfully." "I know." The courtroom doors opened. They filed inside, taking their places on opposite sides of the aisle, like a wedding in reverse. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 60s who seemed deeply uninterested in the theatrics of divorce court. Vanessa's lawyer went first, painting a picture of Caleb as unstable, unreliable, someone whose recent business success was too new to be trusted. He brought up the failed company, the debts, the months when Caleb could barely afford rent. Then he brought up Mira. "And who is this woman living in Mr. Hayes' home?" Vanessa's lawyer asked. "What role does she play in Emma's life?" Marcus objected. The judge allowed the question. Caleb kept his voice steady. "Mira Lawson is my business partner. She helps manage contracts and logistics. She's also a friend who lives with you. Temporarily, she needed a place to stay. I had space. And you believe this arrangement is appropriate for a young child?" "Yes. Mira's been nothing but kind to Emma. She's been a positive influence." Vanessa's lawyer moved on, but the damage was done. The implication hung in the air, that Caleb's home was chaotic, his judgment questionable. Then it was Marcus's turn. He called Caleb to the stand and walked him through the past 6 months, the business recovery, the Tacoma project, the steady paychecks. He presented bank statements, contracts, letters from Emma's teacher praising Caleb's involvement in her schoolwork. "Mr. Hayes," Marcus said, "in your own words, what kind of father do you want to be?" Caleb thought about Emma sitting on the couch watching movies, about her asking if Mira could stay, about the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. "I want to be the kind of father who shows up," Caleb said. "Not perfect, not always right, but someone who's there when it matters, someone she can count on." Marcus nodded. No further questions. Vanessa took the stand next. Her lawyer asked her about her concerns, and she delivered them with practiced emotion. She worried about Emma's stability. She worried about the influence of strangers. She worried that Caleb's recent success was fragile and that when it collapsed, Emma would be caught in the fallout. When Marcus cross-examined her, he was surgical. "Miss Whitmore, when was the last time you asked Emma what she wanted?" Vanessa hesitated. "I talk to Emma every day. That's not what I asked." "When did you last ask her where she wanted to live, who she wanted to spend time with?" "She's 8 years old. She doesn't get to make that decision." "But her feelings matter, don't they?" "Of course they do." "Then why didn't you ask her before filing this motion?" Vanessa's composure cracked, just slightly. Because I'm her mother. I know what's best for her. Marcus let that sit for a moment. Then he said, no further questions. The judge called a recess to review the evidence. Caleb and Marcus stepped into the hallway. Caleb felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. They waited for an hour. When they were called back in, the judge delivered her ruling without preamble. Based on the evidence presented, I see no compelling reason to modify the existing custody arrangement. Mr. Hayes has demonstrated financial stability and a commitment to his daughter's well-being. The motion is denied. Caleb felt relief crash over him like a wave. Vanessa's face went tight, her lawyer already whispering something in her ear about appeals. Outside the courtroom, Marcus shook Caleb's hand. You got lucky. I know. He called Mira from the parking garage. She answered on the first ring. Well? We won. He could hear the relief in her voice. Good. When are you coming back? Tonight. Jonathan wants a meeting tomorrow. Says it's urgent. Of course he does. Mira paused. You ready? No, but we're doing it anyway. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon at Jonathan's office. Caleb and Mira arrived together, the recording device hidden in Caleb's jacket pocket. Jonathan greeted them with his usual charm, but there was something different in his demeanor, an edge, a tightness around his eyes. Thanks for coming on short notice, Jonathan said, gesturing them to sit. We need to talk about Phase 2. We haven't agreed to Phase 2 yet, Caleb said. I know, but circumstances have changed. I need to accelerate the timeline. Why? Jonathan leaned back in his chair. My investors are getting nervous. They want to see faster returns. If we don't deliver, they pull funding. And if they pull funding, the Tacoma project stalls. Mira's voice was calm. That sounds like a problem with your investors, not with us. It's a problem for all of us, which is why I'm proposing we restructure the payment terms for Spokane. Front-load your fees, get you paid up front so there's no risk on your end. Caleb felt alarm bells going off. Why would you do that? Because I need you committed, and because I can't afford delays. Mira glanced at Caleb, then back at Jonathan. We need to see the revised contract before we agree to anything. Of course. I'll have my team draft it this weekend. Jonathan stood, signaling the meeting was over. I know this is moving fast, but trust me, this is going to work out for everyone. They left the office and sat in the truck, Caleb's hand shaking slightly as he turned off the recording device. He's panicking, Mira said. Yeah. Caleb called Claire from the truck. She answered immediately. We just met with Jonathan. He's trying to restructure the Spokane deal, wants to front-load our payments. That's a red flag. He's moving money around to cover losses. Did you record it? Yeah. Good. Send it to me. And whatever you do, don't sign anything until I've reviewed it. Claire called back an hour later. This is exactly what we needed. Jonathan just admitted his investors are pulling out. That's proof he's operating on borrowed time. I'm filing charges Monday, but I need you two to keep playing along until then. Caleb felt sick. How much longer? 3 days. Can you hold out that long? Caleb looked at Mira. She nodded. Yeah, Caleb said. We can hold out. Monday morning came too fast. Jonathan sent over the revised Spokane contract. Mira spent hours tearing it apart, finding every clause that would trap them if the project went south. If we sign this and the project fails, we're liable for Jonathan's debts, she said. He's making sure we can't walk away. So we stall. They sent Jonathan a list of revisions. His response came back terse, demanding another meeting. That meeting was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon, the same day Claire planned to move. Caleb and Mira arrived at Jonathan's office just before 2. The receptionist looked nervous, directing them to the conference room without her usual small talk. Jonathan was already there with 2 men in suits, his lawyers. Caleb, Mira, thanks for coming, Jonathan said. His smile was strained. We're finalizing the Spokane terms today. Caleb felt his pulse spike. We haven't agreed to the terms yet. I know, but we're out of time. I need a commitment today, or I'm moving on to another contractor. One of the lawyers slid a document across the table. This is the final contract. Sign it now and we move forward. Walk away and you forfeit your remaining payments on the Tacoma project. Caleb stared at the contract. This was it, the trap closing. He was about to speak when the conference room door opened. Claire Voss walked in, flanked by two federal agents. Jonathan's face went white. "Jonathan Reese," Claire said, her voice formal and cold. "You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." One of the agents stepped forward and cuffed Jonathan, while the other recited his rights. Jonathan's lawyers immediately started objecting, demanding to see warrants. Claire ignored them. She turned to Caleb and Mira. "You two are free to go. We'll need formal statements later this week, but you're not being charged." Caleb felt like he couldn't breathe. "It's over? For you?" "Yeah, it's over." They walked out of the building in a daze. Mira stopped on the sidewalk and let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "We did it," she said. "Yeah, we did." 2 weeks later, Caleb got a call from a man named Richard Mendoza with Cascade Development Group. "Mr. Hayes, I was reviewing the Tacoma project files as part of the investigation. Your work was exceptional. I'm putting together a bid for a public works contract in Portland, and I'd like you to be the lead contractor." Caleb blinked. "You want to hire me?" "If you're interested, 2-year project, solid budget, city oversight." Caleb didn't know what to say. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but don't take too long." Caleb hung up and told Mira. Her face broke into a genuine smile. "That's incredible." "Yeah, it is." By late spring, Caleb had signed the contract with Cascade Development. The project was everything Richard had promised: complex, challenging, but fair. Mira officially joined as a partner. Emma started spending more time at the apartment. Vanessa didn't fight it. She'd moved on and seemed content to let Caleb have more custody. One Saturday afternoon, Caleb and Emma were at the park. Mira was chasing pigeons with an enthusiasm that made Emma laugh. "Dad?" Emma said. "Yeah? Are you happy now?" Caleb thought about the question. A year ago, he would have said no without hesitation, but now? "Yeah, kiddo, I think I am." Emma hugged him. "Good. You deserve to be happy." That night, Caleb and Mira sat on the balcony watching the city lights. "You ever think about what comes next?" Mira asked. "Sometimes, but I'm trying not to plan too far ahead." "What about you? You going to stick around?" Mira was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good." Caleb realized that this quiet, imperfect, complicated life was exactly what he'd been searching for. He'd spent so long trying to prove he wasn't broken. But the truth was, he had been broken. And maybe that was okay. Because being broken meant he'd had to rebuild from scratch. And in rebuilding, he'd found something better than what he'd lost. He'd found people who showed up when things got hard. He'd found work that mattered. He'd found a version of himself that didn't need to be perfect to be worthwhile. Success isn't about getting back to where you were. It's about building something new from the pieces that are left. It's about showing up even when it's hard. It's about trusting the people who choose to stand beside you when everyone else walks away. The life you build after everything falls apart can be better than the one you lost. Not because it's easier or prettier or more successful, but because it's real. And real, Caleb had learned, was worth more than perfect ever was.